So about 6 months ago, I uploaded my Socket 775 Test PC build, and I kind of talked about a AMD Test PC I'd be building, and I guess that's what we're doing in this video. So the idea is I'm going to be building it in the rack mount case and throwing this in my server rack, along with a similar system with a dual socket 1366 motherboard. So I'm kind of just going to jump into the parts here. For the motherboard, processor, and RAM, we have the A10 5800K with the stock cooler. We have 16 gigs of DDR3. This is the stuff I threw in my server during the SSD recovery video. And then the motherboard is the ASRock FM2 A85X Extreme 6. I think at this point everyone knows the story of how I got this hardware, so I'm not going to say it again, but I will link a video in the description where I talk about that. So if I pan the camera over, we have to remove the optical drive bays first. And for that, I just loosen 4 screws that hold everything in. And then it's just a matter of lining up the screws with the bigger holes to lift everything out. Looking back at the motherboard area, I'm just going to throw in the I/O shield, and then I'll throw the board in there, and I will get that screwed down. The nice thing is this case came with all of these screws for really everything. One of these days I'll get some lighting above my workbench here. So now that the board is in there, it's quite a bit darker in there, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on my phone's light. And that makes a huge difference. So I guess the next thing we can do is install the front fan. So that sits on a little bracket here that screws in to the top. And I just have to remove 2 screws here to get it out. So for the front fan, I'll be using this Cooler Master PWM 120mm fan. I got this from the case my computer teacher donated to me, and I guess I'll link that video too. But this has been sitting in my basement for a little bit over 2 years, just not really doing anything, so I decided I would clean it off and use it in this build. So the bracket here slides into some pegs and then goes that way, so I'll be mounting it this way. And then to secure it in there, I'll just be using the included self-tapping fan screws. So yeah, I realized I mounted the fan backwards, so I just flipped it around, and I'm using all 4 fan screws for this, which is kind of new for me. So if we move the case back up front and move these front panel wires out of the way, we can just throw the fan in there and get it screwed in. A nice thing about this board is right here, you can barely see it, there is a PWM fan header that we can just plug that right into. So for the 60mm fans in the back, I'll be using these 2 noise blocker fans here. These are brand new. They also came with these anti-vibration mounts for each. So I think the way you mount these is you put that through there and then pull it through. And then this you can just pull through the case. So with that done, it's just a matter of popping these in the back. And they're kind of a pain to line up, but there we go. And you know, they're pretty loose in there, but you know, whatever, it's fine. I just hope they don't fall out. So you can't really see too well, but this motherboard has 2 fan headers right there that are perfect for these to plug into. So I ended up flipping this fan around 90 degrees, and that allowed me to manage that cable better. So I guess now would be a good time to install the PCIe devices. So this board is laid out in a weird way. I have 2 1X cards here, and I'd like to put them in this slot and this slot, but if I put a card in this slot, it blocks my top PCIe 16X lane. So it's kind of annoying, but whatever, I'm just going to throw it in the bottom slot, which electrically is 1X, and I don't really think I'm going to be throwing any 16X cards in that bottom one. So I just removed these screws there. I have a DVI capture card, I won this from Louis Rosman, and that's going to go in the bottom slot here, if I can line it up. You can't really see what's going on, but okay. That's in there now, and I'm just going to screw it in. Then I have this Rosewill dual gigabit NIC. I got this like 3 years ago, and that is going to go in the top slot. That's just going to allow me to have NICs to plug into, say, like Cisco routers for my class to test or whatever. And yeah, that's going in the top 1X slot. I also have an open slot here just because I am missing bracket covers for that, but that's not the end of the world. It's totally fine. And the last thing I'm going to do for now is install the power supply. So for that I'm going to go with the Raidmax RX 500AF. I pulled this out of the Socket 775 Test PC, and I threw in a Sparkle power unit that weighs about the same. So I'm just going to drop this in there because the cables all get caught. and just put that in the back of the case. And then I will line everything up and screw it in. Then of course, running all the cables, I'm just going to do that off camera because it's easier. So I have the cable management pretty much done. Looks a lot messier than it is, and I just have everything kind of tied up nicely. And so yeah, the cable management is pretty much done here. So I have everything just kind of nicely tied up and everything. And I have a bunch of these adhesive cable tie mounts. These things are really nice. This is the first build I've done with them, and they're just a blessing to have, really. And the case has an internal speaker there, so I just have that wired up down there too. And sorry for the shaky camera. I have to do this one-handed. Anyway, last thing is the hard drives. Right now, I actually don't have any of them, really. So the SSD is coming out of my MacBook Air, and I ordered an adapter from China about a week ago. Should take another 2 weeks or so to get here. And 2 of the drives are at my friend's house right now. So for now, there's not going to be any hard drives. Of course, I'm just going to save this footage, and when I get the hard drives, I'll finish the video. But for now, we're just going to test it. So I'm going to reach around back here. You can see I have VGA plugged in, I have all my peripherals plugged in, and power. And I figured VGA was the best option because that's what it's going to be using once it's in the server rack. So yeah, with that said, monitor is plugged in. Let's go ahead and hit the power button. So it's a bit loud, but I guess we'll just wait for it to post if it does, and go from there. So I got the system to post. I also threw in a clock battery because I forgot I took it out of this board. And if you look at the RAM, you'll notice there's only 2 modules in here. It looks like this entire kit is incompatible with this board, which is weird because I thought this board worked with that memory, but I guess not. So I think what I'm going to do is throw that memory back in the Mac Pro server and take the Mac Pro server's kit and throw it in here, because I want 16 gigs of RAM in here, but you know, I really don't have 16 gigs of RAM other than that kit to put in here. So I ended up getting the drive adapter in the mail a few days after I filmed the last clip. So that came pretty quickly. So you can see I have a 256 gig MacBook Air SSD in there, and then it just adapts that to SATA, which is plugged into the motherboard on this side. I also have a 640 gig drive down there. I think I said I was going to be putting in a couple 2 terabyte, or a couple single terabyte drives rather, and I decided not to just because there's not really a lot of space in this chassis for that. So 640 gig drive down there, and that, like I said, is plugged in with SATA, along with the stock optical drive with SATA as well. This machine is doing a weird thing where I think the clock battery might be dead because every time I unplug the power and plug it back in, the fans start off at full speed, and then I have to go into the BIOS and reset that, and quite a few other changes I have done. So I'm just going to be leaving it plugged in for now. But until I get that clock battery for it, I don't really know what I'm going to be doing. I also swapped out the memory with the stuff from the Mac Pro server. You can see we have 4 modules, 4 gigs apiece, for a total of 16 gigs. And then I threw that kit into the server to replace it. As for the operating systems, I have a pink flash drive there with Windows 10 on it. I'm also going to be installing probably Linux Mint on this. And I'm just going to do all that off camera because it's quite a lot to do and it's kind of boring as well. And then I'll probably continue there. So if you do the math, it's actually closer to 7 months since I filmed the last clip. I have the operating system installed on here, and I'm just going to turn on my mouse here and turn on the computer. I have the clock battery fixed. I think I mentioned that in the last clip, and that got replaced shortly after that clip was filmed. So if we go here, we can eventually get the grub boot menu. And yeah, we have all our options. So this has Linux Mint and Windows 10. I'm going to go into Windows 10 for now. And while that boots up, which will be pretty quick, it's already there. Maybe not, but whatever. So I got rack rails for this and the 1366 test PC, which You may have already seen that video, or if that video is coming after this one, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. But these rack rails cost me like $100 each, and they're pretty terrible. These parts mount in the rack, and then these parts go inside of these, and it's really physically painful to mount these in a rack in a lot of ways. So I'll probably throw in some pictures of how I have my other computer mounted in the rack with these rails. But with that said, that is pretty much going to be the end of this video. It's taking a bit longer to go through everything right now. But as for the future of this build, recently I've been wondering what the point of having a low-spec PC just in my server rack would be. Obviously my office is on the second story of my house, and my basement is in the basement. And it's not like I'm really going to be able to access this computer. And I have a couple of really nice laptops, so I don't really need a computer like this in the rack, especially when taking up 4 U's. So as for the future of this computer, eventually I'm probably going to stumble across some more dual socket equipment, and I'll probably throw that in this case along with other equipment to support like another VM computer or something like that, as opposed to a PC like this one. You may have also noticed I took the things off the front of this, or I took the rack mount ears and cover bezel, whatever you want to call it, off the front of this, and that's because I've kind of been using it as a normal desktop for the past little while, and it just fits on my desk a bit better that way. So you can actually stand this on its side, and again, my arm's broken at the time of filming this, so I can't really lift things too well. But it sits nicely like that. It scratches up my desk quite a lot, but other than that, it's fine. Something else is this computer has a capture card in it. Don't really need one of those in my server rack, so I don't really know what I'm going to do with this. I'm probably going to transplant it to a new case eventually, but this case is fine for now. Anyway, with that said, this build is finished. You'll see more about the rack rails in the 1366 test PC video, and I'm going to cover how I have the rails mounted, because it's really weird how you mount these. It doesn't fit in the standard unit, and mounting it that way makes it where the case kind of sits in a weird spot. It's hard to explain, but I'll show you in that video. So I think with that said, that's going to be it for this video. You're probably not going to see much of this computer on the channel anytime soon, because there's just nothing really to do with it. The processor stays cool and everything. It's a nice computer, has a nice blue glow and everything. But yeah, so once again, with that said, I think that's going to be it for this video. So thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.